Have you noticed that politicians struggle to enact the things they run on? That regardless of who wins elections, lawmakers cannot pass whatever legislation they like. They find themselves bound by what is popular, or at least their sense of it. They can only act within a narrow set of ideas, and that range is called the Overton Window. And on the Overton Window podcast, we look at issues around the country and talk to the people who change what is politically possible. Now, you shouldn't say one thing and do another. That violates a basic moral principle that we learned as children. But there is a lot of hypocrisy in politics. And Abby Mitch is the executive director of Michigan Rising Action and has found a lot of instances. Abby, welcome.
Thank you, James. Good to be here. Thanks so much.
What's the strategy behind your project?
Basically a lot of what we do is we make sure that what politicians, basically what you said in the intro, what politicians say they are going to do for Michigan is what happens. And we've found a lot of instances where politicians say one thing and do another. A big focus of our research has been the Goshen Project, and particularly the rapid expansion of MEDC and the ways in which that program is not really serving the interests it was sold to the people that it would do, or even some of the politicians who voted for it. We've also, and in that course, we've actually paired up with Mackinac Center's Legal Center to help us with attempts by the MEDC to evade public inspection of their activity.
Can you explain more about that project? Lay it out for people.
Absolutely. So we read in the Wall Street Journal back in May that a blacklisted company from China called Hesai, it's a LiDAR company, which is a kind of advanced sensor that's put on autonomous vehicles to help them navigate the environment more like a human driver would. They were added to a DoD blacklist saying that you cannot do business in the United States with this country. It's a concern that the Chinese government's invested, or Chinese military is invested in this company and its products. Well, it tipped off our radar because MEDC has been so aggressive and so indiscriminate in its willingness to help tech companies in that sector get into the Michigan marketplace. So we asked MEDC, hey, have you ever spoken with this company before? MEDC waited and waited and waited, and a month later they said, hey, we got your FOIA. We'll get back to you. Then we waited and waited and waited, and MEDC said, hey, here's the amount of money we think it'll cost. And we paid the money, and we waited and waited and waited, and finally we consulted with the Mackinac Center and said, this is not the process. I mean, soup to nuts, an agency cannot simply just fail to respond in a timely manner to public inquiry about its activity. And that's pretty much where the legal ball got rolling.
Yeah, and that's kind of an instance where this is a public agency. It does the public's business. What you're asking for is something they could probably get without too much of a hassle, because it's not like there are thousands of workers who are making secret deals all the time. And through the Freedom of Information Act, everyone is entitled to get this type of information, any documents that our public agencies are creating. And there's a process for it, and the process can be, if the agency is willing, just give you the information that you're asking for. Mm-hmm. And if they're not willing, well, then they start to extend deadlines. They start to inflate estimates. They do a lot of things to prevent someone from getting the information that they're entitled to. At least for this one, why did you pick this battle? Because I think that matters a lot to your political facts.
Absolutely. I mean, there are two things that have risen to sort of tripped our radar. Is one, foreign investment is a concern. I mean, if you look at what Congress has been doing, and we're a state-concerned agency, but if you look at the steps that Congress has been going through in order to make sure that a domestic economic incursion on our critical manufacturing, I mean, let's call back to 2020 when we found out the hard way that most of our medical equipment and pharmaceuticals are made in China. How much they've done to harden and protect the domestic economy from Chinese incursion. And it stands to reason that when you over and super fund entities like MEDC to the tune of billions of dollars and then give them secret fiat to do whatever they wish with those dollars, there's a real concern about who around the world sees that pot of money and maybe wants a piece of it. And part of our project was to demonstrate that whatever national security controls MEDC may be executing, they're certainly not adequate. They are ending up extended in the case of our FOIA. We did eventually get the result. In the case of our FOIA, over a year of dialogue and, uncalculated uncalculated amounts of assistance and help given to this company to bring its wares and bring its operations to the United States.
When you say secret fiat, you're not just talking about like their ability to hide behind FOIA. You're talking about something else entirely, right?
Yeah, there's obviously been the issue to those in the know of in order to be for public officials, in order to be a part of even the discussion in the first place, signing non-disclosure agreements, and whether that's an elected official and whether that's a civil servant, public servant, I think we can all agree that no one that works for taxpayer money should be signing paperwork that says, yes, I will keep everything that we've discussed here secret from the public that pays my salary and whom I presumably work for.
And there is legislation available to fix that. But, you just look, so even with the stuff that you are talking about of our lawmakers negotiating with foreign interests to spend taxpayer money subsidizing these foreign interests in possible ways that could possibly cause detriment to the public, as we've seen from a lot of this crazy stuff that's going on with Chinese tech companies. Even with that, our lawmakers look at this and say, look, I need to do something about jobs. These things sound like they're going to be about jobs. If I hand out subsidy deals, no one's going to criticize me for it because I'm giving the public what they want. Is that what's going on there, or are you seeing that lawmakers are seeing some consequences for making these deals?
Well, I'd like to bring a couple of things to light about that. One, the big banner project that has been talked about in many national headlines, Goshen, has yet to bring a single job to the Michigan people. So that falls flat on its face. American LiDAR, the company that we're talking about, that Michigan Rising most recently investigated, that project was defunct, again, after over a year of dialogue with the state, help with site prep, offered incentives, ended up folding up shop, never creating a job. And also, interestingly, a number of the companies that have gotten handouts from MEDC recently are tier one or primary suppliers to businesses that have been pulling jobs from Michigan. In the case of Goshen, Michigan Rising put forward research demonstrating that GM is almost certainly a customer of Goshen's battery operation. American LiDAR also has General Motors as a customer. General Motors just pulled its headquarters from downtown Detroit. They are not, I won't say they don't have jobs here because that would be untrue, but I think it's a hard sell to say they're in the business of making more jobs here right now.
Well, that's one of the things. If you look at the economic data for the state of Michigan, they're never about any particular company, but we have just a little more than half of the jobs, or the auto parts manufacturing jobs that existed in the state in the year 2000. Like, we've already lost just about half of all of the auto jobs that we had not even that long ago. One of the big differences between where we are now and where we were in 2000 is that we didn't subsidize private sector employment like we do now. If any company has has a project to sell, lawmakers are happy to give them $100 million, $200 million, up to $1 billion worth of other taxpayers' money in order to land those headlines, regardless of whether it's a growth industry, it's going to come out ahead for Michigan, or even whether the company does what it says that it's doing. At least for these business subsidy programs, the point is to announce that there are jobs. There's very few consequences for not living up to the expectations.
Well, absolutely. MEDC has historically, whatever the iteration of the corporate welfare scheme is, has historically simply defaulted on any effort at clawbacks because it is just too cumbersome and difficult to get money back, or even sort of these softer services like site planning and real estate help. How do you get those services back once they've been rendered? The cost is sunk. There's no way to bring it back. The other sort of thing you have to ask yourself is it really a good idea for us to get into the business of encouraging businesses that can't survive and grow on their own? Any small business owner is going to tell you that if you're not growing, you are dying, and I don't see how it would be possible for these businesses to meaningfully grow when, rather than having a hospitable tax environment, a hospitable regulatory environment, a good supply of workforce, how simply relying on these short-run incentives puts these businesses in any position to succeed over the long term.
So let's kind of cover some of the other work that you're doing outside
Absolutely.
of business subsidies, even though it's an issue that is near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
I cover this, and please check out some of the work that we've done in Mackinac.org. But let's talk about some of the things you've done to hold elected officials accountable to their voters. What are some of the other things that you found that people care about?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things we have looked into is sort of this issue of lawfare that has bubbled to the surface. There has been, and we file quite a number of campaign finance complaints, and meaningful ones at that. We recently filed a complaint with the Secretary of State finding almost $200,000 worth of improperly donated funds from a super PAC out of Washington, D.C., and we have yet to have any of our complaints answered by the Secretary of State. They sort of sit on a shelf and collect dust, which is a problem when you consider that this money is in about 2 weeks, James, going to have run its course in terms of its value. Now, the beneficiaries may have to pay back those funds, but Election Day will have come and gone. Those funds will have served their purpose, and our Secretary of State sort of picks and chooses along very clear partisan lines which issues to pull to the top.
As in, we have rules for how to run an election. We have some enforcement mechanisms, even though you've made an allegation that some people are breaking the rules, it's impossible to enforce that before the elections are settled.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the reason we have these rules is because money can do quite a bit of work in elections, as pretty much anyone that tunes into a television has figured out, being drowned in political ads this time of year. That you might be able to exact the overspend back, but the actual value that money represents is long gone if you wait too long. Certainly these candidates are going to have to pay back some of the money, but they'll have already gotten their advertising or their mailers or whatever they use that assistance for done and gone.
What would you prefer to see?
I would prefer to see an equal application of the law. I mean, mistakes happen. Campaign finance can be confusing. New candidates, especially with our term limits, can make mistakes. But an equal and fair application of the rules sort of keeps us all in line. If one group of people knows they might get away with it in the short run, that creates an entirely separate problem.
Why do you think in this case the law is being applied unequally?
Because elections have consequences, James. You and I both know that. And I think if there is an interest in making the system, at least from our experience, whether it's MEDC or the Secretary of State, there is an interest in making the system work for particular interests at particular times.
So you mentioned an agency, this Michigan Economic Development Corporation, is earning some of your accountability work, and the Secretary of State, who is also an elected official. Help me think about if you're going after a legislator, what are you looking for?
if we're going after a legislator, I wouldn't say that we go after anyone in particular. I think really what we want to see is government consistently doing the job it promises it would do with an eye towards conservative principles, which we believe is the best way that government can serve the public. So pretty much we operate off of what does someone say in public, and do they have a record of this not matching up? I mean, an example recently that in the last year that some may remember is Appropriations Chair Angela Whitwer kicking appropriations funds or kicking state contracts back to her firm. Now, that was great work by the Detroit News, and we did whatever we could to continue to fly spec the budget for instances like that. And part of our role in that is making sure that people know that the people elected to represent them, at least partially, are making sure that their own pockets are lined and that their own people are taken care of. And it isn't necessarily Michiganders first.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what was going on in that situation?
Sure. In this case, appropriations chair, so all appropriations bills, which are to say budget bills, originate in the House of Representatives, putting the person who is the chair of the Appropriations Committee in a very powerful position to influence how money is going to get directed. And by the way, we're not talking about a little bit of money. We're talking about billions of dollars. Billions of dollars being directed around the state. And whoever sits in that chair seat has a lot of power to decide what even makes it into the budget in the first place, what makes it into the first draft, which is sort of the skeleton that moves the entire budget process along. So when you have an appropriations chair who is willing to entertain or not properly vet at the very least line items that they may have a conflict of interest in, that's a real concern. And that's what happened is Angela Whitwer, appropriations chair, owned a PR firm that did a lot of business with the state of Michigan. Her committee okayed a budget in which a substantial contract went back to that firm. And it wasn't clear that she had fully divested personally from that firm even. Because, we do have a lot of legislators over the years that have been business people. They usually quit their law firm or divest from a partnership in order to avoid conflict of interest. But at the time, Representative Whitwer was driving a car that had an Edge Partnerships license plate on it. So it which was the name of her company. So implying that, indicating that she was still a part, and she was also still on their website. I forgot to mention that she was still on their website, implying that she was still very much part of this company. And sort of an icing on the cake is all over this same time period, she used her official office to host a baby shower for someone at her company. So another misappropriation of state resources, really blurring that ethical line of, whether or not this appropriations chair was a good steward of state property. Which is actually the people's property, to be clear.
And in fact, it's one of the things that has been frustrating me about lawmakers these years, especially with district grants, or in the case that you found where it's directly benefiting someone's private interests. Like, we elect our lawmakers to discuss what is in the best public interest, and yet a lot of the things that they do are clearly defined to advance some lawmakers, some legislators' best political interests. And there is a big difference between that.
That budget year, not to cut you off, but that budget year in particular was an abysmal example of this. Hundreds of millions of dollars were doled out in tiny piecemeal pet projects to lawmakers around the country, around the state of Michigan. And what was really concerning is that these handouts didn't equally go to everyone. They seemed to be really niche, small projects, parks, pickleball courts, pools. They went to for very niche, small-scale projects, and were heavily concentrated in the Detroit area, which tends to be the more Democrat stronghold part of the state, which was the controlling party writing the budget. It was just a brazen example, soup to nuts, all the way through the process, that this was not a budget meant to spend the people's dollar in the best interests of providing public services, but meant to give individual lawmakers, it was an individual lawmaker cash grab to bring back prizes for their individual districts.
Yeah, and what I like about, what I think is interesting about the case when lawmakers are behaving like this is that I think very few people need a direct explanation for why that's bad. It's something that you know kind of implicitly. It's like, no, you should care about the public interest, not individual, not the personal, or using government's power to advance your personal relationships and your private political interests. But kind of more broadly, like, I do want to put something to further explanation, because a lot of these projects do sound, like you're buying a local government a new fire truck. That's one of the district projects. What's so bad about that? It's like, well, as state lawmakers, if they think that the state needs more fire trucks or needs a better system for improving local infrastructure, in particular fire infrastructure, well, it can start a grant program and have people apply for funds so that the money is best used to give the person who is most in need of the fire truck the new fire truck. That's not what they're doing here. They're just saying.
And one of the first projects that we took up when I came into this role in spring of 2023 was the whole electric school bus issue. And the problem is, unlike your situation in which a bid is put out and whoever offers the best product for the correct amount of money can contend for the contract, when you pick specific handouts in the budget, like the electric buses, you end up doing business with a company that, in the case of Ann Arbor Public Schools, they didn't run when it was cold. The batteries would run out mid-route. They wouldn't, they had they were incredibly expensive to house and maintain. When government hand selects who wins, everyone loses. And that's pretty much the bottom. And I know that sounds like a slogan, but it also happens to be incredibly true.
So let's talk a little bit about what exactly you particularly do. So we've talked about some of your work with FOIA. I assume there's some social media monitoring. What are some of the things you do to try and notice what's going on and hold lawmakers accountable?
Absolutely, yeah, right. So as a organization in the public interest, we actually talk a lot to the public. A lot of our work has depended on people reaching out over email, over the phone, over X or whatever, and saying, "Hey, I've heard about this. Here are the details. Can you look into it?" We had a constituent out in Berrien County let us know that their state lawmaker at the time, Joey Andrews, had threatened his own county commission in the budget process if the county commission did not vote to apply for a federal grant that would have benefited one of the political allies of this state lawmaker. The only way we got that story is an everyday citizen reached out, gave us the details, set us up with, what we needed to know to pursue looking into it. And we get, I think we do our business with a high degree of integrity. I'd say that there are false starts more often than not, but what's important when you're an organization like this working in the public interest is that you're listening, that you take the time to comb through the details and sort fact from fiction and follow the facts wherever they go.
So listening to stakeholder complaints. Come on, tell me some more.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It sounds so like there should be some more palace intrigue to it, but it's really just being a good, concerned citizen, using our talents in government and our resources in order to, like in the case of MEDC and the lawsuit, hold these agents accountable with extra resources than the everyday citizen might have. But at the end of the day, we are here to advocate for the public and what the public wants and needs or doesn't think smells right in the government they pay for.
How do you think your work is going to change what is politically possible?
Well, we do quite a bit of media outreach, And, I think that a good dose of sunlight on some of these problems helps to shift and limit what politicians think they can get away with. I mean, let's look at SOAR, the collective work, not just Michigan Risings, but a lot of organizations, including the Mackinac Center, the collective work that has been done about the SOAR fund, which was heralded at the beginning.
Which is a selective subsidy program that allows lawmakers to give whatever company they want, however much taxpayer money they want, with the only limitation being what they can get approved through appropriations committees.
Well said. Well said. But if you look at that, when that was originally passed, I mean, there was a press conference with a stage and lights that was co-produced with General Motors. I mean, that thing was announced with more fanfare than frankly most events in Lansing. And the conversation has really shifted on SOAR. You no longer see lawmakers jumping to stuff gobs of money into this fund the way they did at the beginning. It has become less politically possible. So I really think making sure the public is educated that these stories, because they are stories, are told, and that we don't just go for the flashy headline, that we make sure that the public has the opportunity to understand what is happening in their communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I also think that something that would benefit the public debate is for our lawmakers to stand by the things that they say, to ensure that there's a fair process, or one of the issues that you've worked with, and that they do things that are above the board. I think our government would work the way that it's intended with war watchdogs like yourself out there.
Oh, thanks, James.
Abby, thanks for coming on, and good luck on your attempts to shift the Overton window.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Overton Window, a podcast from the Mackinac Center. Please subscribe and rate. For more, check us out at www.mackinac.org. That's Mackinac with a C, like the island.